Hi, folks. It's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. Welcome to our Facebook Live. Whoa, I'm offline. Okay. Hey, folks. It's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. And for some reason, I was just offline, but I should be back online now. Welcome. I'm here to answer questions and talk about what's happening in the natural world. And if you can hear me and see me okay, please send a quick comment. I'm going to check my phone, see if I can find me live on Facebook so I can see your comments. All right. So just getting set up here. There we go. All right. I think I'm working. Oh, Susan and Loie watching. Yay, great. Thank you for letting me know. Really appreciate it. Sounds like people can see and hear me, so that's great. Hi, Linda. Hi, Susan. And hi, Susan. Thanks. All right, welcome. Well, I have an interesting sort of quiz to talk about this morning. If you saw my picture that I posted on Facebook, you'll notice that I had a picture of something that somebody had observed on the trails at New Hampshire Audubon Sanctuary in Concord, the Silk Farm Wildlife Sanctuary by the McLean Center. And I got an email asking about these sort of scratched open areas that the person had seen on the trail, about dinner plate sized. Something had been scratching in there. And Lisa had seen a big group of European starlings in the trees above the area where all the disturbance was in the leaf litter and on the ground. She wondered if the starlings had been making these sort of open, scratched up areas. So I went on the trail to investigate. And she told me where she'd seen it, and I walked in that area and I found what she was talking about. And if you look at my picture, you'll see there's leaves on the ground, but then there's open areas where the leaves have been scratched away. And they are about dinner plate sized. Some of them are round, but not all of them. And as I was walking along the trail, what did I see but a flock of wild turkeys? There were 8 of them in that area, and they were the culprits creating these open scratched areas. Turkeys have big feet that can scratch really well in the ground, and they feed on nuts in the fall, especially. Actually, for many part of the year, most of the year, they'll feed on these nuts like acorns and beech nuts and the pine cone seeds that might fall on the ground. Excuse me, anything along those lines. And so they were scratching there, I'm sure, trying to find any acorns that had fallen under the leaves or any beech nuts, any food like that that was under the leaves. Um, and I was very happy to actually go out there and find the culprits at work. And it definitely was not the starlings. Starlings like to feed out in the open in field areas, and where Lisa was on the trails at Audubon was very close to the open field that we have. Um, and so they were probably feeding in the grassy areas and then coming up in the trees to perhaps roost for the evening or roost for a rest. So that's the answer to our quiz photo that was on Facebook. Let me just check the messages here on my phone. I don't always get them on my computer, so I'm checking on my phone. That's why I'm looking down. So good morning to everybody. I see Alan and Jim and Candy and Ava, and Lori and Pat, Tammy and Steve. Thank you. All right. Yes. Stefan, yep. Turkey perps. That's it. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to post a comment with a question. I'll check my phone periodically for any questions and comments that have come in. And as always, you can send us a message on Facebook, or you can email us at birdsetc, BIRDSETC @nhaudubon.org. And I'm Becky with New Hampshire Audubon, here to answer any questions and talk about what's happening in the natural world. So I have a couple of things that I wanted to mention. I wanted to give a migration update because I saw a couple of really interesting things that were reflective of what's going on with migration right now. And one of them was migrating blue jays. I was out on Monday doing an early morning bird walk, as I often do at this time of year. And I had flocks of blue jays going over. And in about an hour, I counted 105 migrating blue jays. Now, blue jays don't always migrate in big numbers like this, but they oftentimes will move around. This year clearly is a big year for them to migrate, and that will be dependent very much on the food sources. And they feed a lot on acorns and are very strongly tied to the acorn crop. So they are probably moving from areas farther north or east or west that have few acorns. Oftentimes with oak trees and other trees that produce nuts, they are in synchrony. So one year they'll produce a whole lot of nuts. All the trees will produce nuts. And then the next year they'll produce very few. And with the drought that we've had, that may have impacted the tree's ability to produce a lot of nuts as well. So the blue jays are undoubtedly moving, looking for good areas of acorns. So we've got blue jay migration going along and has been remarked on by quite a lot of people, and there's been some pretty high counts of them. Now, whether they'll stay around for the winter or not is anybody's guess. And I'll talk more about the Backyard Winter Bird Survey when we're getting close to it, but I encourage you to take part in it. It's New Hampshire Audubon's annual winter survey. It's the second weekend in February. Anybody can take part in New Hampshire, and that's how we get some information on what's happening over the winter among our resident birds and any birds that might be visiting. Like maybe we'll have big numbers of purple finch this year, or pine siskins are starting to show up almost throughout the state. And they're a bird that breeds farther north, but they'll come south in huge numbers when food supplies up north are poor. And we've been getting a lot of reports of them, and they're getting into the southern part of the state. So it'll be interesting to see this winter if they stay around. And same is true with our blue jays. Will they stay around? The other thing that I saw was 19 flickers feeding on a lawn. Now, flickers are a woodpecker. Northern flicker is its full name. And they feed on ants. So there are only New England woodpecker that feeds on the ground. And in migration, you can get large flocks of them. 19 was a lot for me to see at once on the ground feeding. And I took a video of it. So it's on YouTube. So if you want to look at New Hampshire Audubon's YouTube channel, you can see a video of the flickers that I saw. I see some questions coming in, so let me take my phone and see if there's anything else. Oh yes, Candy. All right. Had half a dozen flickers. Is it common to see so many? Boy, we're on the same wavelength there. So yes, flickers migrate primarily the end of September and early October, and that's the time when you can see gatherings of them. They mostly leave the state for the winter time, but some do linger. And we seem to be getting sort of increasing numbers in the winter on our annual Backyard Winter Bird Survey. Not sure why that is, except for maybe some more milder temperatures and and some more open ground. But again, those numbers on the Backyard Winter Bird Survey help us keep track of what's going on. So Candy, that's great that you had flickers in your own yard too. I've seen flickers in the trees around my yard, but not feeding on my lawn yet. So that's some migration highlights. If you have any other questions about birds you've seen, send me a comment or message us on Facebook. Let's see. I also wanted to mention some common questions that we're getting. We've talked a little bit about them, but I'll reiterate. One is, where are all the birds? So folks are finding that their feeders are relatively quiet, or have been recently anyway. And that's pretty common at this time of year. This is the time when birds move around a lot, and they sometimes abandon feeders entirely. There are good natural food supplies, at least in terms of seeds. And so they may be out more in the woods feeding on the natural food crops. I just had a small group of chickadees in my yard, and chickadees, we're seeing a big migration of chickadees this year also. Again, we don't always see chickadees migrate, but we're seeing some, and there have been some good numbers recorded, um, and along the river valleys. And all right, you may have lost me there for a sec. Hopefully I'm back. I was talking about chickadees and quiet feeders, and the chickadees are um, are moving through. They're migrating, but your feeders may be quiet, and that's perfectly normal. It seems to happen to some people in some years. They may have never seen it happen before, and then for some reason this particular year their feeders go quiet. Goldfinch are definitely around. People are remarking that there aren't many goldfinch, but I think they're concentrated in other areas, because I was out at the community gardens and had 120 of them yesterday. So they're gathered at places where there are good food sources and not necessarily in need of feeders right now. All right. And yes, Stefan comments that white-throated sparrows have arrived and juncos will show up soon. The first vanguard of juncos, these are dark-eyed juncos, have started arriving. There are only a few of them. I saw just 3 the other day at the community gardens. And they're a bird from farther north, and they will tend to stay around in the wintertime even. The old nickname for them is snowbirds. And so they can be birds that you might see all winter at your feeder. Some of them definitely go farther south and winter in mid to southern US, but others stay right up in our area. And we had a huge influx of white-throated sparrows over this past week. Um, and they're a lot of fun to see and hear, because they make a lot of chink, chink noises. And then they're the sparrow that has the Sam Peabody call. The Let's try that again. Old Sam Peabody, Peabody, Peabody. And in the fall, their hormones are tapering down, if not their breeding hormones anyway, are tapered down. And it affects their song. Plus, you have a lot of young birds learning to sing. So you kind of hear a white-throat song that doesn't sound quite right. And it can be kind of fun to listen to them. And then we also have showing up right now their relatives, the white-crowned sparrows. They're from farther north, and they will move through. They don't winter. They just come through in the fall, and we see them again in the spring. And right now we're seeing a lot of the immatures. The adults have black and white crown stripes, and the immatures have brown and tan stripes. And they're a bigger sparrow. They're kind of beefier, and they have a grayish breast. And they're quite pretty when you get to see them clearly. Uh, all right. Other questions? Please send a note or other observations. Got flickers. I'm just checking my phone for messages. Thank you. All right. So if you are suffering from a lack of birds, just give it some time, a little colder weather, maybe our first snowfall, and birds will be starting to come back into the feeders. I haven't put my feeders up yet because of bears. It's best to wait until the bears have gone into hibernation before putting your feeders back up. but you can scatter seed on the ground. Of course, it feeds the squirrels, but the things like sparrows like to feed on the ground, and they will come to scattered seed on the ground. I tend to use a mixed seed when I'm doing that. In fact, I just picked up a bag of mixed seed, and I'm going to try putting some out to see if it'll bring in some of the white-throated sparrows and some of the other sparrows that are around. Hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us. One of the things we've just started in the New Hampshire Audubon e-news, that's a weekly email e-news that we send out to anybody who signs up for it. Anybody can get it. You can sign up for it on our website. And we've just started a feature plant, a plant profile of plants that are good for pollinators, for birds, and for other wildlife. And the feature plant this week was the New England Aster. And many of you may have seen this in bloom right now. It's got purple flowers with lots of petals and a yellow center. And it can range from purple to pink. And it's a tall plant that you might see in weedy meadows or on the edges of fields. It's a plant that blooms late, so it can help out late migrating monarchs or other pollinators that are still active. It's beautiful, and they've developed some compact varieties of it also. And we have both the compact variety and the tall variety in the pollinator garden at New Hampshire Audubon's McLean Center in Concord. So if you want to take a look, stop by. The grounds are open at the center. The building is not open, but you're welcome to stop by and visit and check it out and see. So I'd encourage you, if you're thinking about your yard and lawn and what you want to do, to explore some of these plants that are good for birds and other wildlife and for pollinators. We'll be talking more about them as we have different plants profiled each week. And I encourage you to sign up for the e-news if you'd like to hear about them. All right. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for joining us. Let's see. There are a couple of things I want to mention about the yard also. And I mentioned this before, but I'm going to reiterate that when you're doing your fall cleanup in your yard, it's a good time to be messy. And it's a good time to just leave those leaves around the base of bushes and shrubs, around the base of trees. It helps provide insects, worms for things like robins, and it can be great in the springtime too. As snow is melting, there's that moisture area there where you can have a good supply of small insects for migrating birds coming through. And speaking of robins, that's one of the ones I wanted to mention. They are gathering in big numbers at places where there's fruit. Now we think about robins as feeding on worms, which they do, but in the fall and winter time they switch to fruit. So they'll gather where there are good supplies. It could be crabapple trees, vines that have grapes on them, anything that has lots of little berries. And they'll eat those. I had, oh boy, was it over 100 or so, the community gardens, middle of last week, when there's lots of good berries. Now, when they clean out the berries, when the berries are gone, they'll move on to a different place. And so you might have a big concentration one week, and then it'll be gone another week. And the robins will migrate farther south, but some of them are staying the winter now. We used to think of them as harbingers of spring. When the robins came back, it was really spring. But they're wintering more and more in the state. And again, we've been able to see that on our annual backyard winter bird survey. And part of the reason may be some milder winters, but another part may be that there's definitely been an increase in planting of things like crabapple trees, ornamental cherries that have fruit that holds on well into the wintertime. And this is provide some food for the birds. And robins will also feed on sumac too. And bluebirds do the same thing, and we're starting to see them more in the wintertime. Now, robins don't come to feeders that much. You can put out some fruit for them, chopped up cranberries, things like that. But bluebirds will come to feeders. And they'll eat sunflower hearts, they'll feed on mealworms, and they may visit your feeders more in the winter time as we see more of them staying during the winter. All right, I'm just checking for any messages. Hi, Debbie. Thanks for joining us. All right. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send a comment. Again, it's Becky with New Hampshire Audubon. You can send a comment on Facebook. You can message us. And we have a crew of volunteer naturalists that answers emails as well at birds, etc., BIRDS, at NHAudubon.org. All right. I can't remember if I've told you this before, so I'm going to mention again. Our New Hampshire Audubon Nature Store sells bird-friendly coffee, and some of you have asked if you can get some, even though the store is closed at the moment. And the answer is yes. If you just call our center at 603-224-9909 and talk to Craig. He can arrange the sale and a pickup time. So you can still get your bird-friendly coffee by giving us a call. And don't hesitate to leave a message if you don't get Craig right away. He's in part-time, and he will check the messages and get back to you if you let him know that you want some bird-friendly coffee. Now, bird-friendly coffee is great for our birds. This is coffee that's grown in a way, it's actually certified to be bird friendly. So it's grown in a way that maintains habitat for birds. And that's important to us because many of the birds that breed here and migrate down to Central and South America will winter in these coffee plantations. And there's been a big push to change to sun-grown coffee. Coffee is traditionally a shade-grown plant, so it maintains an overstory, and then you have the coffee plants underneath in the shade, and that is good habitat for our wintering birds. They're not really our birds, but the birds we think of as ours go down there for the winter. Now, when it's switched to sun-grown coffee, it requires a lot of fertilizer and pesticide input in order to be successful. There's no overstory, there's no food for our migrant birds. So we encourage you to get that bird-friendly coffee and drink that, and that will help the birds that we care about and that we enjoy so much in the summertime. So again, you can still get it from New Hampshire Audubon. Give a call, 224-9909, and ask for Craig. Great, thanks. All right, just checking for any other messages. Hi, Catherine, thanks for joining. All right, so next week, I'm hoping to be talking about different kinds of feeders. As I mentioned, it's not quite time to put our feeders up because the bears haven't gone into hibernation, but it's a good time to get yourself set up and going. So I'll try and bring a few props, and we'll be talking about that next time. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was planning for your yard. And it's not too late to put plants in. You want to make sure you keep them watered given the drought that we've had. I just put in a few plants myself. And when you're thinking about plants in your yard, think about native species that have caterpillars for birds. And they'll also provide food for our pollinators as well if they're flowering plants. But there's been a study done, and a yard, if it's 30% non-native but 70% native, can provide sustaining habitat for a pair of chickadees to raise their young. So you have to take the chickadees and extrapolate to other species, but that's something to think about when you're putting in your plants this fall, is to what kind of native plants can you put in. I'll provide some more resources on that, but there's a Professor Doug Ptolemy who has some great information and a video out there that describes why these native plants are great to have for birds, why the caterpillars are so important, and which native plants are better than others for providing lots of caterpillar food. Uh, All right. Hi, Ron. Thanks for watching. And Stefan asks if our program is a regular schedule, what time and day is the schedule? So I usually do this Facebook Live program Thursdays at 10. I'm always interested in input. If you have questions, if you have comments, love to know if you think that there's a time that would be better, a day and time that would be better. We'd like to know that. It doesn't mean we can accommodate it, but we'd certainly like to know when you might most want to watch a Facebook Live show. And again, if you have questions, you can always send us a message, and you can always email us at birds@nhaudubon.org. And hi, Jennifer. Thanks for watching. So usually I'm on for about half an hour from about 10 to 10:30, answering any questions and talking about what's going on in our natural world. All right. And what else do we need to talk about today? We've got a very windy day today that tends to keep bird activity down, so I was not out on my usual bird walk before sitting down in front of the computer. So we've got our migration update, and I'll see what I can do to get those feeders together for us next week. If you're getting to the point where you are buying seed, remember, a diversity of seed is good for birds. So some birds eat some kind of seed, others eat different kinds of seed. So the more variety that you can plan to have, the bigger the variety of birds are that you will have. So I mentioned that sparrows like to feed on the ground. They don't usually come to tube feeders. And then woodpeckers like suet, and we have all kinds of the sunflower seed and the thistle seed, which siskins and redpolls like. In fact, this year you might want to plan to get some thistle seed if our pine siskins stay around. We never know if they will. Sometimes they come through in the fall and then they're gone. And that could be true for all the migrants we've been talking about recently. The blue jays could stay or they could move through. Crossbills we had earlier this fall, their numbers are now down, so we may not see them in the winter at all. They may have been around just while the pine cone crop was at its peak, and now that that's tapering off, the cones are opening, the seeds are scattering, the crossbills may be moving on. We've had lots of red-breasted nuthatches around. They may stay or they may go farther south. So we'll be very interested to see what all of those different migrants do. All right. So has anybody got any other questions or comments? Send it along. We'll wrap it up here in the next couple of minutes, and encourage people to look out for what should be happening in the current week. And that should be sparrows moving through and warblers kind of tapering off and ending. And it looks like we're going to have another hard frost coming up tonight, so that may push a few things from farther north down into our area. So could be a good weekend to watch for migrant birds coming in. So thank you all for joining me. I really appreciate it. New Hampshire Audubon is an independent, nonprofit Audubon society, not affiliated with National Audubon. We're active just in New Hampshire, although we'll tackle some national issues if they affect the wildlife of New Hampshire. So I hope that you will show your support by making a donation to us on the New Hampshire Audubon website. Thanks very much. Again, if you have questions, you can message Facebook, you can send an email, and we'll be back again next week. Thanks very much for joining me.